Okay, so 25 hours. Can you even imagine? That's like longer than 2 transatlantic flights back to back. That's how long Senator Cory Booker talked nonstop on the Senate floor, who actually blew past a really old record. So what in the world would make someone do that? Like, what's going through their head? What does it even feel like? And I guess most importantly for us, what does this crazy event tell us about him and about what's going on in American politics right now?
Yeah, that's the juicy stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's the story here? And that's exactly what we're going to unpack in this deep dive. We've got all sorts of sources, news articles, biographies, even stuff from Senator Booker's own website. We're talking the full picture here. We don't just want to tell you what happened. We want to figure out what it all means.
Right. It's not just a timeline. We're looking for the why behind all of this. So where does a 25-hour speech even come from? Well, it starts way before he stepped up to that microphone. Let's rewind all the way back and look at what shaped Cory Booker, starting with his childhood. He was born in D.C. but grew up in northern New Jersey. And his parents weren't your average folks. They were civil rights activists, and they were some of the first black executives at IBM. I mean, talk about an upbringing that instills a strong sense of justice.
Absolutely. I mean, that kind of environment definitely leaves its mark. And you can see that drive playing out early on, even in his school years. This guy wasn't just good at school. He was excelling at, like, everything. Football All-American in high school. That tells you right away. He's disciplined, he's competitive, and he knows how to go after what he wants.
No kidding. And then he goes to Stanford, right? And it's not just one thing there either. He's juggling a political science degree and a master's in sociology, all while playing varsity football, being a peer counselor, writing for the student newspaper, and he was senior class president. That's not just being busy. That's like master-level time management. I bet those skills came in handy later on, dealing with all the crazy, complicated stuff in politics, being able to see things from different angles and connect with all kinds of people. It all goes back to those early days.
What's wild is he didn't stop there. He gets another master's in history as a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford. Think about that, going from studying American politics to diving deep into world history. It's like this guy's brain was on a mission to learn everything it could. And then Yale Law School, where he's running free legal clinics, working with Big Brothers Big Sisters, and involved with the National Black Law Students Association. It's like he's already living out the values he'd become known for later on.
Right. It's like each step is building towards something. But here's where things get really interesting. After all that fancy education, all the doors it could have opened, he chooses to work for a nonprofit in Newark, helping underserved families, providing legal aid. Not exactly the typical path for a Yale law grad.
You got that right. This wasn't about some high-paying corporate gig. This was about using his skills where they were needed most. And he didn't just work in Newark. He became part of it. Moved there, became a tenant organizer, started a nonprofit. And get this, he lived in the Brick Towers housing project. You want to understand the struggles of a community. That's how you do it, by being right there in the thick of it.
Seriously, reading reports is one thing, but actually living it is totally different. That firsthand experience must have given him such a unique perspective, a real understanding of the problems he'd later tackle in his political career. It wasn't just theory for him, it was real life.
And you can see that in his work later on, pushing for urban renewal and social programs. It came from a place of deep understanding, not just some abstract idea. And this brings us to his early days in politics. He gets elected to the New York City Council at 29. And he's already a champion for economic security, healthcare, and public safety.
Talk about hitting the ground running. And then there's this incredible story. He went on a 10-day hunger strike, protesting drug dealing and violence in the city. That's not just making a statement, that's putting yourself on the line.
Oh, yeah, that hunger strike, that was a major statement. You could tell early on that this guy wasn't afraid to take bold action. Then, of course, he decides to run for mayor. The documentary Street Fight, if you haven't seen it, it's a must-watch. You see his first attempt, which doesn't work out, but you also see his incredible grit. Like, he doesn't give up. He learns from it.
And eventually, he wins in 2006. And as mayor, things really start happening. Crime rates go down, the economy starts growing, he gets more affordable housing built, even improves city services and green spaces. You can't argue with results like that.
Nope. That's a pretty solid track record.
Yeah.
And this is where his time as mayor really sets the stage for his later political ambitions. He shows that he can lead, that he can get things done, even in a tough city like Newark.
And then there's this huge thing. Mark Zuckerberg donates $100 million to New York schools. That's massive. It shows that Booker can bring people together that he can inspire them to invest in his vision?
Right. It wasn't just about the money. It was a statement. People believed in him and what he was trying to do for Newark. And all of this, his experience in the city, his understanding of his problems, it built up to his next move. In 2013, he jumps onto the national stage and gets elected to the U.S. Senate and then reelected in 2014 and 2020. Now he's making laws that affect the whole country.
So what are his big issues, the things he really cares about?
Well, he's been super clear about that, even on his website. He believes healthcare is a basic human right. Everyone deserves quality, affordable care. And he's all about criminal justice reform, which makes sense, given what he saw in Newark. He wants to end mass incarceration, change sentencing laws, the whole system. Then there's economic opportunity, the idea that if you work hard, you should be able to get ahead, have a good life. And of course, he's huge on environmental protection, fighting climate change, and he's a big advocate for civil rights, for everyone being treated equally.
You can really see how his time in Newark shaped all of that, the issues he chose to focus on. And he's been involved in some pretty important legislation, too. Right?
Oh, yeah, and here's what's cool. He's not afraid to work with people from the other side of the aisle. Like the First Step Act in 2018, that was a bipartisan thing, reforming federal prisons, trying to reduce crime. And then there's the Break the Cycle of Violence Act, which was all about giving money to communities to stop gun violence. Again, bipartisan support.
That's so important, finding common ground, especially these days. And there's also the Trown Act, trying to ban discrimination based on natural hair. That one had support from both sides, too. It shows that he's willing to work with anyone if it means getting good things done.
Exactly. And on top of all that, he's always talking about environmental justice, making sure that communities aren't getting dumped on with pollution just because they're poor or minorities. And he co-sponsored the Faster Labor Contracts Act, which was designed to help unions negotiate contracts more quickly. Another bipartisan effort focused on fairness for workers.
All right, now let's talk about the elephant in the room, or maybe the marathon runner on the Senate floor. That record-breaking speech, over 25 hours. I mean, how do you even talk for that long? What was going on that made him decide to do something so epic?
Well, the main thing was his total disagreement with President Trump's policies. He saw that speech as a chance to get people's attention, to talk about what he thought was wrong. And he got into a lot of specifics, too. Like, he was worried about cuts to Social Security and Medicaid, programs that help a lot of people. He was critical of Elon Musk having a role in the administration. And he talked about foreign policy decisions he disagreed with, things he thought were dangerous. And a big thing he kept coming back to was the idea that democracy itself was being threatened, that the rule of law was being ignored.
So it wasn't just some vague protest. He had a whole list of things he wanted to get off his chest. But how do you fill 25 hours of talking? Did he have a team of speechwriters hiding somewhere, feeding him lines?
I doubt it. But he did have some pretty powerful strategies. Like, he talked a lot about John Lewis, the congressman who passed away, and this idea of good trouble, basically standing up for what's right, even if it means breaking some rules or making people uncomfortable. And he read letters from everyday people, folks who were worried about what was going on in the country. That's a really smart move because it makes those big political issues feel personal. Real. He also quoted historical figures and stuff from books, which gave his arguments more weight.
Yeah, I can see how that would keep people interested. And it definitely worked. I remember everyone was talking about it.
It was a media frenzy. Everyone was covering it. People were arguing about it online. It totally shook things up in the Senate, which I'm sure was part of the plan. And you can't ignore the symbolism of it all. He broke the record set by Strom Thurmond, a guy who was a big supporter of segregation. And here's Booker talking about social justice and equality. Like a huge contrast, a powerful statement.
It really makes you think about how far we've come, but also how far we still have to go. And you mentioned earlier that this wasn't a typical filibuster, where they try to stop a specific bill. This was more about bringing attention to broader issues, right?
Yeah, it was like a giant spotlight, shining it on the things he thought were most important. So we've talked a lot about the politics, but I think it's also interesting to look at Senator Booker as a person. He's got this very specific image, this reputation for being a good guy, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes from his personal stories, the things he's done outside of politics. Like, we talked about him living in that housing project in Newark. That says a lot about his character, his willingness to connect with people who are struggling.
And there are all these other stories, too. Like, there was a fire, and he reportedly ran into a burning building and carried a woman out. And another time, he shoveled snow for an elderly neighbor. It's like he's always going above and beyond, doing things that most politicians wouldn't even think of.
It really makes you wonder, is this guy for real? And then there's that time he lived on a food stamp budget for a week just to see what it was like. He's not just talking about poverty, he's trying to understand it on a personal level.
Right. It's like he's always trying to walk in other people's shoes. And he even wrote a book, United, Thoughts on Finding Common Ground and Advancing the Common Good. That title alone tells you a lot about his philosophy.
He's all about empathy, about working together even when things are tough. And while we're on the topic of personal stuff, we should mention his relationship with Rosario Dawson, the actress. That definitely brought him some different kind of attention.
It did, although he's always been pretty private about his personal life. But all of it, the politics, the personal stories, it all creates this image of someone who's smart, who cares about people, and who's willing to take action. But of course, no one's perfect, and there have been some controversies along the way. We got to talk about those too, to be fair.
Definitely. Every politician has some baggage, right?
Right.
Like that first mayoral campaign, which was pretty intense. The documentary Street Fight shows all the drama and the fighting. And later on, he got involved with a tech startup called Waywire, which raised some eyebrows.
And then there were his comments about Bain Capital back in 2012. That got people talking, especially in the political world.
And as a senator, he did something pretty unusual. He testified against Jeff Sessions when Trump nominated him for attorney general. That was a big deal.
Oh, yeah, that was a bold move. And he also supported Senator Bob Menendez when Menendez was on trial for corruption. A lot of people criticized him for that, said it was bad judgment. And there was that whole thing with the Kavanaugh hearings where he released some confidential emails. That didn't look good to a lot of people, like he was playing politics with a sensitive issue.
And more recently, he voted against a plan to lower drug prices, which made a lot of progressive groups angry. They felt like he wasn't doing enough to help people afford their medicine. And then there was the controversy over a judge he recommended. People were questioning her qualifications. And going even further back, some of his old college writings came out, and people were debating what they meant, whether he'd changed his views over time.
Yeah, it just goes to show that no one has a perfectly clean record. But it's important to look at the whole picture. Like, early in his career, he worked with the Urban Justice Center and the Newark Youth Project, doing a lot of good work for people in need. So even with the controversies, you can see that commitment to social justice running through his whole career.
Absolutely. And bringing us up to speed, that Senate speech definitely put him back in the spotlight. He's become a major voice against President Trump, and that message has resonated with a lot of people.
You can see it everywhere. He's constantly in the news, and he's all over social media. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, even TikTok. He even used TikTok during his speech. He's definitely trying to reach as many people as possible, especially younger generations.
Yeah, that multi-platform strategy is pretty smart. And what's he talking about these days? What are his big issues now?
Well, you guessed it, he's still criticizing Trump and Elon Musk. He's pushing for stronger social programs, and he's talking a lot about veterans issues. It's like he's using every channel he can to get his message out there.
So to wrap things up, it's clear that Cory Booker has dedicated his life to public service, whether it's on the streets of Newark or the floor of the U.S. Senate. And that 25-hour speech, that was a pretty amazing display of his commitment, his willingness to go to extremes for what he believes in.
Totally. And his whole story, from his early days in Newark to that historic moment in the Senate, it shows that he's not afraid to fight for what he thinks is right. He's smart, he's passionate, and he knows how to get things done. He's definitely a force to be reckoned with in American politics.
And for you, our listener, I want you to think about this. What does Cory Booker's story, with all the ups and downs, tell us about what's happening in America today? And what about that 25-hour speech? What does that say about how politics works now, how leaders are trying to get their message across?
And here's something else to chew on. Booker kept talking about good trouble, about making a difference, even if it ruffles some feathers. So what does good trouble mean to you? What are the issues you care about, and how can you get involved? Maybe Cory Booker's story can inspire you to find your own way to make a difference in the world. It's something worth thinking about.